A bunch of students at a school were just sitting around when they saw military trucks roll by with other students casually riding in them. The girls were instantly starstruck by the handsome guys they saw passing by. The other boys, of course, grumbled that these dudes were nothing special. Just kids from those fancy specialized schools, the so-called warrior school. Then the story hits us with what went down in the past. While everyone was busy living their boring, normal lives, the world got a taste of what it would be like if solo leveling became reality. Portals popped open in the sky, and dozens of dragons rained down on Earth. The kind of stuff that only happened in anime suddenly dropped right into the middle of their city. Fear froze everyone on the spot. Later on, scientists figured out there was another planet eerily similar to Earth. Turns out neither of them was flat, by the way. This knockoff Earth exploded, which is how they even discovered it existed. But that crappy planet had to dump a bunch of space debris right on us. Giant meteor chunks smashing into Earth and turning people's dreams into nightmares, because wherever those pieces landed, the weird nature of that other world started to spread here too. After that, more portals cracked open and ridiculous monsters started crawling out of every corner. 17% of Earth's surface got turned into a giant no-go zone. Humans lost all control and got wiped out like flies. Ordinary people didn't stand a chance. One terrified soldier hid and watched as a single bald monster with a horn wiped out his entire unit. When the guy realized what was happening, that bald freak got even uglier and opened its mouth full of nasty teeth. The soldiers tried to fire everything they had to slow it down, but the creature's skin was tougher than steel. Sadly for a young soldier, his body wasn't so tough. That single punch to his gut had him needing a blood donor ASAP. The impact launched him into a concrete wall, shattering both the wall and his bones. Humans had zero chance. If there were a status window, this guy's strength would be ranked at best, while the monster would be a comfy B minimum. The soldier stood his ground anyway, waiting for the end. The monster loomed over him, ready to finish the job. But as it swung for the final blow, something changed. A weird new power surged through the human, like he was channeling his inner Sung Jin Woo during an awakening. He felt the natural human limits cracking, all thanks to the effect of that exploded planet. The chains holding him back snapped, and he did the same to Monster. He grabbed its arm and shattered the demon's bones with one martial arts move. That moment became the first recorded case of humans awakening and finally having a shot at fighting back against their invaders. Even though this phenomenon affected every human on Earth, the awakened abilities were different for each person. Some people who discovered their new powers chose to train and hone these gifts. Others decided to find a purpose worthy enough to wield such potential. Amidst this chaos, another portal tears open in the sky. From it, a horde of horned demons storms through, ready to invade Earth once more. But this time, their leader sees something unexpected, an entire army of humans waiting right in front of the portal. Weapons drawn and eyes blazing with determination. These are the ones who chose to fight back using their new powers to reclaim the dungeons and the danger zone. They became special agents with a single mission and were now known as adventurers. In front of that portal, a fierce battle ignited. Horned demons versus humans, alongside the same soldier who defeated the first monster. That clash may mark the beginning of the era of dungeons and the rise of the adventurers, sparking a colossal war between two species. After the brutal battle, with only a few human knights left standing, the world hailed their bravery. People everywhere were inspired by their strength and sacrifice, especially by the first soldier who awakened his power and chose to stand against the monsters. It didn't take long for organizations dedicated to training adventurers to appear all over the globe. Among them, one stood out in the Republic of Korea, a training school for teenagers that produced the best adventurers over the last 25 years. This place became known far and wide as the Warrior School. Back in the present, we return to the moment when the two friends were chatting. One of them mentions how at the Warrior School, they even tell students what really happens inside the dungeons. The black-haired friend asks, "What happens if someone dies?" And his buddy laughs, saying they're confident for a reason. They have to pass a brutal test just to get in. But before he can explain more, his attention shifts as a group of girls nearby starts squealing in excitement. The girls are completely smitten, gushing over someone they describe as impossibly attractive with a beauty that can't be put into words. It's a blonde boy with large ears, a half-elf who's sitting there soaking up the adoration as the girls shower him with praise. The friends glance over baffled, and one explains that the boy is always on TV. His name is D.F. Choi. His father is a legendary adventurer, and his mother is an elf. Rumor has it he's a genius destined to reach the highest rank among adventurers. With all his charisma, D.F. Choi flashes a dazzling smile at the girls, driving them even crazier. It's revealed that he's already gone into the dungeon 14 times, a fact that makes the black-haired boy scowl in annoyance. He doesn't think DF Choi is that impressive at all, and his friend starts teasing him, saying he's just jealous. The two boys bicker playfully until they're interrupted by another friend who walks over and invites them to hang out. But Jerry Young, the black-haired boy, shakes his head saying he can't join them this time and hopes they at least have fun. His other friend protests, telling him not to be so serious after the exams and to just come along. Before he can push further, their third friend jabs him in the stomach, telling Jerry Young it's fine if he wants to sit this one out. Jerry Young, still glued to his phone, glances up and thanks his friends before saying goodbye. The boy with the partly dyed hair tells his buddy to be a bit more sensitive next time. Did he even know why Jerry Young was doing all this? In a flashback, we see Jerry Song sitting beside an elderly person lying in a hospital bed. Back in the present, as he walks through the city streets, Jerry Young looks at his phone and sees an alert reminding him he hasn't paid this month's hospital bills yet. He gets another notification from his boss. A new job just came in and they need him to start immediately. Meanwhile, Daewon, still waving at his adoring fans, suddenly notices something. He turns his gaze toward Jerry Young, a strange feeling twisting in his chest. One of Daewon's friends, who also attends the warrior school, asks if that kid did something to him, but Daewon shakes his head saying he didn't. Watching Jerry Yang's back disappearing into the distance, Daewon wonders if his instincts are playing tricks on him. He decides to brush it off as nothing. As for our protagonist, Jerry Young, he walks through the streets, stressed out and grumbling to himself about how much he hates this job. Eventually, he arrives at an abandoned subway station, pushes past the warning tape blocking the entrance, and descends the stairs into the darkness, ready to face whatever comes next. Jerry Yang's boss, a man with striking white hair named Jaiwoo, introduces the person beside him, a bald man in a suit, as the new client Jerry Young will be working for. The black-haired young man politely says it's a pleasure to meet him, but instead of returning the greeting, the bald man's expression sours immediately. Glaring at Jerry Young, the client snaps that he thought Jerry Young would bring his best employee, not some random kid. Calmly, him insists that Jerry Young really is the best they have. Bald man scoffs and starts arguing with Jaiwoo, accusing him of trying to trick him with amateurs. Despite the rising tension, both Jaiwoo and Jerry Young stand their ground, pointing out that the client is being unnecessarily rude. The man in the suit, however, refuses to back down. He demands that they call someone truly competent, and with a threatening tone warns that if Juwon doesn't produce someone respectable, he'll make both of them regret it. At that moment, Jurong turns to the muscular man standing protectively behind the client, clearly his bodyguard, and asks if he's an adventurer. Then, with a sharp grin, Jurong corrects himself, saying the guy must be a retired adventurer reduced to following an old man around and taking orders. The bald man is taken aback by the boy's boldness. But before he can retort, his bodyguard steps forward. Snapping his fingers, the bald man's enforcer growls that there's no point in talking anymore. He'll break an arm or a leg of both Juwon and Jurong to teach them a lesson. The bald man smirks, clearly pleased, and orders his guard to grab the boy, adding that if they don't beg for their lives, they'll die right there in that room. Feigning fear, Jurong puts on an exaggerated act, sarcastically asking for help and wondering what he should do. But then, his demeanor shifts completely. A blue aura pulses around him as he declares coldly that he doesn't know how to beg. It's revealed that Jurong has secretly returned to the dungeon 371 times, completely legally. The story pauses to explain how dungeon smuggling works. Everyday adventurers venture deep into dungeons to hunt monsters, helping humanity survive and thrive. Once a dungeon is cleared, they find incredible treasures within, some so powerful they're beyond human comprehension. But before these adventurers leave, every treasure must be handed over for government inspection. This is crucial because if left unchecked, these artifacts could fall into the wrong hands and cause untold destruction. The Adventurers Association must register and examine each item and then charge hefty fees based on the treasure's value. Tempted by greed, however, some adventurers try to sidestep this system, sneaking treasures out and selling them off illegally to avoid the outrageous fees. Far from the eyes of inspectors, they hide these powerful relics for personal gain. If these criminals aren't caught, it threatens everyone, creating countless problems for society. The government's propaganda ends by urging all citizens to report any smuggling they see, so these outlaws can be brought to justice. When we return to the scene, the showdown between the ex-adventurer and Jerry Young is about to begin. Jowan, unfazed, calmly lights a cigarette while the bald client glares at him, baffled by how he can stay so relaxed. Watching the two opponents facing off, the bald man asks Jowan if he's really going to let this happen. Jowan raises an eyebrow, asking if the bald man is backing out now after causing all this fuss. Offended, The bald man fires back that they should be the ones trembling. He explains that Pilji, the muscular man, didn't retire because of injuries, but because he attacked his own teammates, and he wouldn't show any mercy this time. Hearing this, Jerry Yang repeats the accusation with mock horror, sarcastically remarking how terrifying it is. He calls Pilji exactly what he is, a criminal. Grinning, Pilji brags that the guy he killed was pathetic, dragging him down, so he just took out the trash. But Jerry Yang laughs at this, saying he gets what Pilji means, and shoots back that the man should be more self-aware since he's just as he points out that Pilji lost everything because of his own reckless behavior. Before Jerry Yang can get another jab in, Pilji lunges forward, aiming a punch straight at his face. But as Pilji's fist connects, he freezes, eyes widening, realizing that something is very, very wrong. He observes that Jerry Yang had managed to dodge simply by turning his face to the side, and the boy remarks that attacking like that was quite rude. Pilji becomes enraged, and a green aura begins to emanate from him. Then the man charges to finish off Jerry Yang. Wanting to provoke his rival, the boy says that since he was being attacked, he would counter with a quick kick. And with a resounding impact, the boy leaps, trekking his opponent's jaw with his leg. After taking the full force of the blow, the man becomes somewhat dazed, trying to process what had just happened right there. Jerry Yang's boss remains calm, but the bald man is impressed by our protagonist's speed. Jerry Yang once again asserts that he brought the most skilled person he knew, while Pilji was shocked by the kick he received. After the impact, you begin to taunt the man, saying there was a surprise since, judging by his appearance, he expected the bulky man to be a bit tougher. Jowan comments that Lee was lost as the boy treated that smuggler like just a normal kid. However, those reflexes and the power behind the kick to the man's chin had already reached the level of professional. The boy also remarks that it seems the ex-adventurer is beginning to understand that this might be a fight you can't win. However, the bald man doesn't give up, stating that the kid was really good, but it was just a lucky kick. Before the bald man could continue speaking, Jerry Yang's boss responds that he could only feel pity for the big guy. Blinded by rage, Pilji removes his shirt, allowing his aura to surge even more. And Jowan, seeing this, asserts that Lee was undoubtedly a tank. Next to him, the bald man is extremely surprised that Jowan could read his subordinate's abilities and comments that the old man shouldn't be so shocked. The bulky man says that no matter what cheap trick our protagonist decided to use, he was still just a smuggler, and for that reason was going to show him something interesting. Immediately after, several veins begin to bulge on his body, and Lee starts charging a green energy. Jerry Yang explains that after the adhesion, people began to awaken abilities that exceeded their limitations. However, each person has different talents and types, and, as expected, they would awaken completely different latent abilities. Adventurers, of course, took on specific training that matched their abilities and assigned roles to themselves. Looking impressed at his rival, Jerry Yang states that one of those roles was called a tank. Pilji became extremely stronger and more muscular after using various techniques to perfect and increase his stats. The tank is a position where you protect your teammates from the dangers of the dungeon. In this role, the adventurer faces all the monsters head-on in the vanguard without being able to retreat or show fear. The strength in their bodies, trained to the limit, allows tanks not even to feel some bullets fired at them. However, higher-ranked tanks can even withstand immense firepower and missiles easily, and are essentially a protective barrier. Observing his rival's transformation, Yu acknowledges that he is powerful, affirming that the man truly is an adventurer. Pilji, after using all his buffs, quickly charges with both hands to attack the boy in front of him. Jerry Yang, the struggling, manages to dodge, but the ground wasn't so lucky and the entire floor of that subway is shattered. With debris flying in his face, our protagonist tries to land, feeling the air from all that power rushing towards him. The bald man, after sensing that power and being practically a normal human, is almost blown away by the wind that formed. However, a hand helps him stay on his feet. The one saving him was Juwan, who remained as if nothing had happened and calmly asking the bald man if he was okay. The man says that in any case, that adventurer was a bastard because he was really going to mess up someone else's business place like that just for a rivalry. Lee charges toward Jerry Yang, who is in a fighting stance, and the boy just watches his opponent advance. Quickly, the man throws another punch and the boy narrowly dodges it. With an extremely smug expression, Pilji asked our protagonist what's going on. He also questions why Jerry Yang isn't using any of his previous tricks, but the young man remains deep in thought. Jerry Yang retorts, stating that he's not an idiot and wouldn't fall for such an obvious trap like the one the tank was setting. Observing and feeling all the power radiating from Lee, Jerry Yang's boss remarks that the ex-adventurer isn't bad. Pilji's physical strength was around the level of a truck, and if a normal person were hit, every bone in their body would be pulverized. But seeing that there could be more destruction in his territory, Johan orders Jerryong to hurry up and finish it. Because if he didn't, the boy would have to pay for all the damage if anything else broke, and the young man realizes he's running out of options. Pilji maintains that same expression as before, now saying that it seems the boy's boss doesn't understand what's happening. He also emphasizes that Jerryong's cheap tricks are no match for a professional's technique. However, he appears to ignore him and suddenly looks to the side, saying that it seems good. The young man notices that a strong metal beam is positioned beside him, and he quickly places his hand on it. Lee doesn't understand that move and is confused, wanting to know what the young man was going to do with it. Jerryong begins to analyze the iron bar in his hand, realizing that it could actually be used, and then states that it should at least be enough. While he was distracted, Pilji charges at him. The man is so furious that he's gritting his teeth with his aura spilling out. Jerryong explains that due to their enormous durability, the general belief is that tanks are unbeatable beings. However, that's not the case because they have a very clear weakness and a natural enemy. And at that moment, Johan informs the bald man that the fight isn't over. Pilji continues to rush at his enemy, completely enraged and determined to end the battle. However, Jerryong doesn't retreat and also charges forward with the iron in his hand. The weakness of a tank is an entity that can focus a powerful and destructive force on a specific point. And at that exact moment, with his improvised weapon, the boy moves to strike his enemy and prove his strength. A DPS, a damage per second, is the primary weakness of A, and after saying that, the boy strikes his opponent's jaw with the iron bar, unleashing a blast of energy backward. With the blow, the ex-adventurer spits blood, practically fainting from the attack. Jyongan isn't surprised at all, unlike the bald man who is completely confused by what just happened before his eyes. After the strike, the tank immediately falls backward unconscious for a few seconds and then quickly regains consciousness. With his mouth full of blood, Pildu asks how the protagonist learned to cut like that. But upon hearing this, the boy is confused, asking what the man is talking about. He then says that he doesn't know what Lee is thinking, but he's definitely wrong. However, in his mind, he thinks that perhaps Lee isn't entirely wrong, as he may have seen that person before and therefore recognized Jyongan's cutting style. That person was his father, who was known worldwide and had once been extremely powerful. Our protagonist begins to recount his past, and we see him as a child walking through the corridors of his house, reflecting on how, when he was very young, his father was the greatest adventurer in the world to him, because the boy felt immense pride in the man. And his favorite pastime was watching his father train in the backyard. And it wasn't just because he was family. The man truly was powerful. His name was Yu Sung, and the man had a muscular appearance and radiated aura and power. This was the soldier we saw in the past, the first human to awaken and defeat one of the monsters. A flashback is shown to explain that Sung was one of the heroes of the first generation, who were called the first adventurers. For those who didn't experience it themselves, the story of the first generation is a grand legend. But for the adventurers of that time, it was hell, as they had to witness countless people losing their lives and face battles daily. And more than anything, the main problem was that there was no information about the dungeons or similar things, about what kind of place the dungeons were, or even what kinds of monsters inhabited them, which made exploration even more complicated. In the flashback, Sung is seen alongside his ally preparing to fight a giant worm-like monster. Even monsters that are considered easy to defeat in modern times were formidable challenges for adventurers in the past. The Gak Komi leaf, the beast that our protagonist's father was facing, begins to spit a chorus of green liquid, hitting Si Young's friend. Sung narrowly escapes the attack, but when he looks to the side, he sees his friend being dissolved by the worm's attack. For the adventurers of that time, any creature was an unknown calamity capable of destroying everything. Yu Sung, after witnessing his friend being melted away, quickly becomes enraged and strikes the beast with his spear. This was a time when adventurers had no information to fight against monsters. After delivering the blow, Sung realizes something he didn't want to see. His titanium alloy spear wasn't resistant to the monster's chorus of attack. Items that are now considered common didn't even exist back then. So, adventurers had to make do with what they had. The first generation of adventurers went through trial and error, risking their lives to discover more information about the dungeons. In the flashback, Sung charges at the worm. In the underground dungeon where Yu was, some adventurers arrived as reinforcements. The three young adventurers, upon seeing the situation of what was happening, are left breathless, merely observing the scene. Amidst the many people who had been dissolved, the only one left standing was Sung, having defeated the creature with whatever he had at his disposal. The survivors passed on their experiences and accomplishments to the next generation to help them. And after all their deeds for the good of humanity, they were considered heroes. Sung lived this life, defeating creatures and unknown beings for many, many years. After evolving greatly as a hero and as a person, he became known as the Dragon Hunter after years of adventuring. This nickname was given to the first person who managed to defeat a dragon, and Si Young is seen standing imposingly atop the body of one of those beasts. When people saw this news, they were shocked and amazed, and Si Young was considered the strongest adventurer in Asia. And Si Young was also an ordinary person and the father of our protagonist, and the boy expresses that he respected him deeply. Jae Young remembers his father training with his spear, showing all his power and aura, creating a huge windstorm. More than anyone else in the world, Jae Young believed that his father was invincible until one fateful day when he saw something that traumatized him. Suddenly, the man who was in physical prime and training began to cough up blood unexpectedly. Our protagonist, as a child, ran towards his father to see what was happening. However, the man asked his son to stop and not come any closer. According to the doctors, the cause of this sudden weakness and decline was poisoning, and Jae Young cried a lot as he watched his father in that state. At the hospital, he explains that during one of his explorations, his father encountered a deadly poison that contaminated him. As he had always done, his father tried to overcome it more than anything, facing the challenges head-on. However, after decades of overworking himself, his body was at its limit, and even that first dragon hunter couldn't withstand it. During the time someone was weak, colleagues he had trusted with his life came and handed him a piece of paper. These people were disguised as vipers who took advantage of Siwon's vulnerability at that time and took away his fortune and work. For years, in addition to the illness, he suffered mentally and physically, believing that he had only made mistakes up to that point and that nothing he did was rewarded. Years passed, and even when our protagonist was already a teenager, he saw his father sitting on a hospital bed, his body severely weakened. Jae Young mentions that years later, the world began to forget about the dragon hunter Siwon, and his father lost his identity as a hero. After losing everything and suffering from incurable poison that no medical science could cure, all that was left as a reward for you was to be a forgotten adventurer. We then return to the moment when Jae Young had just defeated Pilju. The boy simply stares at his opponent, then turns around and starts walking away while the man tries to mutter something. Our protagonist, after all the memories, becomes extremely irritated, throwing in the piece of iron he was holding and walking towards the exit. The bald man is still shocked by everything he saw, thinking that his subordinate was the strongest man. However, Ju-won remarks that everything went well, though the man remains incredulous, unable to believe that his partner Pildu lost to a kid. But the protagonist's boss remarks that perhaps the bulky man wasn't a good adventurer, which could have been one of the reasons. Jae Young interjects, saying that the man was bragging about hitting his own comrades, which was just a sign of how weak he truly was. As he continues walking past the bald man, the boy states that there are only two reasons why a good adventurer retires. Either their body breaks down to the point where they can no longer explore or face creatures, where they die during an exploration and are never seen again. He puts a jacket back on, saying that he didn't know what Pilda's salary was, but if it was more than minimum wage, the bald man should fire him. Seeing this as an opportunity, Ju-won approaches his client, apologizing and asking the bald man to understand their side. He then asserts that now the fee for the job will be doubled due to the situation that occurred. However, the man in the suit is about to protest, but before he can, Jae Young's boss gives him a menacing look, saying that the boy was the one who provoked first. He then adds that he and Jae Young don't work for free, and seeing that he wasn't in the best position, the bald man agrees and says it's fine. After some time extorting his client, the boy's boss begins to call Jae Young over. The man asks if he has ever heard of the Imperial Wasp, but Yu, upon hearing this while drinking water, immediately spits it out. Wiping the water from his mouth, Jae Young asks if they'll have to fight that, as even for him, that monster was a bit too much. Ju-won explains that the Imperial Wasp is a monster whose danger level is considered the highest, not only in Korea, but in the entire world. What was once a beautiful and lovely city called Yedo is now the nest of the Imperial Wasp and has become a demonic kingdom in Korea with extremely high difficulty. The man then explains that even for high-ranking adventurers, taking down one of these monsters is difficult because these things spread out everywhere. For any fighting one of these creatures is practically suicide. However, for a white-ranked adventurer, it was extremely possible that they could accomplish it. Ju-won explains that according to the bald man, there was a large raid the previous day that wasn't publicized. The boss continues the explanation, stating that the government army and 7 white-ranked adventurers form an attack squad to invade the Wasp's nest. Jae Young is shocked that they gathered 7 white-ranked adventurers. And Jae-won adds that adventurers of that level are so famous that if even two of them come together, the media goes wild. With this challenge, it seems they failed to achieve the original goal of eradication, but the adventurers managed to hunt the queen wasp. One of the seven stole the royal jelly of the imperial wasp and ordered a subordinate from the attack squad to smuggle it. Ji-young seems confused, not knowing what this royal jelly is, and Jae-won begins to explain that it's a nutritional supplement given to a newly born queen by the wasps. Struggling to understand the situation, you ask why a white-ranked adventurer would smuggle a nutritional supplement, as it was extremely dangerous. The boy's boss explained that there have been occasions where royal jelly was brought into this world, and from what he knew, if a human consumed it, they could even come back from the dead. And upon hearing this, our protagonist is extremely shocked. In the underground city, in a deep subway, we hear someone say that all paths to the dungeons are now strictly controlled. This person begins walking through those abandoned corridors, heading to a certain location while repeating this phrase several times. It is revealed that this person was our protagonist's boss, and the man says that this isn't true. Looking at a gate with various red markings, the man thinks that this proves there's always a way to bypass government restrictions. With a blue aura around his hand, he begins to touch the gate, doing something to merge his magic with the markings. His energy reacts with that of the gate, and a massive blue energy light shines throughout the area. The auras begin to merge with the markings there, and then something happens, and the red markings start to disappear. Our protagonist was right behind his boss, and Yohan tells the boy that even though he always says this, he'll repeat it, asking Garyong to be careful. As he cleans his hands, he concludes that this job will be especially annoying and a bit more troublesome than the others. For some reason, you remain silent the entire time, just listening and staying quiet. Trying to get the boy's attention, Yohan blows a puff of smoke from his cigarette into the young man's face. The young man begins to wave his hand to disperse the smoke and then asks why his boss did that so suddenly. Yohan explains that he did it because the boy had his head in the clouds and wasn't paying attention to the mission. The boss asks if the reason the young man was acting that way was because he was still thinking about the medicine that could bring the dead back to life. Garyong starts walking toward the gate, stating that it didn't make sense since such things are really not reliable. Leaning against the massive gate, he thinks that even if it's considered an unparalleled antidote, it won't be able to cure his father's condition. And with that, the young man begins to open the mysterious gate from which a strong light starts to emerge. The boy also thinks that if there was something like that, his father would never have abandoned that thread of hope. After opening the gate and passing through it, the young man finds himself in a mountainous region with a beautiful landscape of clear blue sky. Garyong tries to shield his eyes from the sunlight to get a better view of the stunning scenery in front of him. After the adhesion, dungeons were created all over the vastness of the earth, but among them, there are two considered the largest in Korea, and they are peculiar. The first is Jeju-do, a dungeon fused with a volcanic mountain range, and has active volcanoes and burning rocks. The other is fused with the Egret jungle, and at that moment, the young man was starting to prepare for exploration. The Egret dungeon is located in what used to be Wado in the middle of Seoul, where it's possible to see a destroyed city, now overtaken by a forest. The young man informs that with Wado at the center of Mapo, Yangshan and other nearby cities were all controlled by this dungeon, and most of it remains unknown. A large portion of the region is only D rank, but Wado, or the Wasp, is located as S rank, and the person responsible for the jelly tried to transport it to the meeting area in Baroma. Jo-won explains that, however, after arriving there, the transporter lost contact with the others, and while he might have fled, it's not the most likely option. The boss also says that the man must have dealt with all sorts of things to get out of there, and well, all our protagonist has to do is reach the location and bring back the jelly. But before Garyong sets off, Jo-won mentions that he'll finish his thought asking the young man not to get distracted and just focus on the mission. Smiling while putting on a mask, the boy asks if his boss thinks he would run away. However, Jo-won firmly states that the boy isn't stupid enough to do that. The boss also asks his subordinate to be careful and remember that the royal jelly is precious and humans aren't the only ones willing to risk their lives to get it. After his boss's entire speech, the boy uses a rope to safely descend from the cliff into the middle of the forest. And there in the center, he thinks that he's sure the entire forest must be smelling that peculiar odor. When he looks down, something catches his attention, leaving the young man shocked and irritated. In a forest soil, an enormous footprint of a giant was there, and the boy states that he's sure various things will be attracted by the jelly's scent. Meanwhile, deeper within that vast expanse of trees and botany, several birds begin to fly. A girl with pointed ears is seen extremely out of breath and running from something. The woman tries to stop for a moment to rest behind a tree to catch her breath. Her name was Jinwoo Sarung, and she was in her first year as a warrior, currently facing the biggest problem of her life. It was supposed to be an easy trip to the dungeon for her intermediate exam, but it's clear that the girl was frozen and utterly terrified. Looking to the side, the young woman remains worried, and it's explained that instead of something easy as it should have been, she encountered a monster that should never have been there. It's then revealed that the creature chasing the girl is a gigantic beast. Jean continues trying to stay silent, and still to see if she can escape from the beast that's hunting her. However, a gust of wind begins to approach the girl, and she realizes something she didn't want to. The exam was supposed to be simple. Within the time limit, Jean had to collect as many coins as possible that were placed inside the dungeon. And although it was a test designed to simulate real combat situations, the test area was ranked as low as possible and should have been easy. This was because it was considered a training ground for beginners, one that any novice adventurer could pass. The monster chasing Jean silently approaches, and when the girl realizes it, the beast is grinning right behind her. The woman becomes desperate, and it's explained that even the monsters living there were weak and had low intelligence. But this one was different. The giant with 4 arms and immense strength tries to strike the girl, but she narrowly Jean thinks she should run. But looking at the size of the monster, she realizes that's impossible, so she has to make another decision. At that moment, the girl notices that all she has left is for a miracle. So, she takes out her bow and draws 3 arrows from her quiver to try to arm herself. Despite all the difficulty, she decides to fight back. The 3-star ranked Primal Titan begins to prepare a monstrous breath. In a desperate attempt to save her life, Jean fires 3 arrows at her enemy. Unfortunately for her, the monster easily raises a hand to shield its face, successfully blocking the weak attack. The girl realizes that the Titan skin is tougher than that of a tank, and her chances of winning are almost nil. The primate then, with one of its 4 arms, quickly strikes the ground, causing another gust of wind and rocks to fly into the air. However, with her extreme skill and speed, the girl manages to escape once again. And even in the air, Jean prepares to fire another arrow. Jean thinks that no matter how many arrows she shoots, it's impossible to pierce the monster. But she has no other choice, so 3 more of her arrows fly towards the beast. But this time, the projectiles are propelled by wind. Even though they only superficially pierce the Titan's body, the monster remains unfazed, maintaining its terrifying expression. Looking at the beast, the girl thinks to herself that she didn't need to kill it with her attacks, and it didn't need to dodge or block them. She just wanted it to get a little closer and was hoping the monster would lower its guard for just a moment. The new arrow that Jean readies in her bow is imbued with fire, and the girl is certain that her plan will work. As she lands on the ground, she channels more magic into her arrow. As she is a warrior of a class that imbues magic into the tips of arrows, finally determined and confident that she will survive, the woman prepares to teach the beast a lesson. With a powerful bow attack, Jean uses her flame bombardier skill, firing an arrow that tears through the ground. It's explained that the type of magic that can be imbued into the tip of an arrow has absolutely no limits. And what she chose as a last resort was the largest explosion she could manage. After hitting something, the arrow explodes, causing a massive blaze that can be seen throughout the forest. The woman continues to stare at the spot where she launched her attack, trying to see if she managed to defeat the beast. Despite everything, that attack should have been enough to kill any monster with a 3-star danger rank. However, the girl is completely terrified. After the smoke clears, the monster is seen clinging to 2 trees, having narrowly avoided the attack. The monster, having barely escaped, looks enraged with a terrifying expression, furious at the audacity of its prey. And even with all her power, the attack would only have been effective if it had hit its target. Various thoughts flood Jin's mind, and the girl begins to consider that she might die there since she doesn't know what else to do. Before she can think about needing to run, the monster lands on the ground, determined to put an end to the young woman. It quickly charges at her, and in a desperate instant, Jean runs in the opposite direction, trying to escape. The Titan continues with a psychotic expression, merely wanting to have fun with its desperate prey. However, as if by a miracle from the heavens, just as she had wished, our protagonist suddenly appears, striking the Titan with a weapon. Looking out at the sky, Jean is incredulous at what just gazing at her savior, as if he were her hero. Still in the air, Guardian locks eyes with the girl he had just saved. While Jean remains astonished at everything that transpired, the giant, having taken a solid hit to the chin, is still somewhat dazed, trying to stay on its feet. Our protagonist safely lands on top of a tree and thinks that even though he struck the creature on the chin, it didn't seem to be enough. Looking down, the boy notices that the beast is glaring at him with a terrifying expression. He pulls a strange object from his pocket, something resembling a weapon, which is a tool for adventurers. With his bait in one hand and the tool in the other, the boy charges in a battle to defeat the beast. Jean, witnessing the situation, is extremely impressed because she never imagined that the young man would be bold enough to attack the monster head-on. The girl thinks that the young man is heading towards certain death, and the enraged primate titan lunges to attack him with two of its arms. Shouting loud enough for the girl to hear, Garyin tells her to close her eyes immediately. Even though she doesn't fully understand what he's talking about, Yu quickly points his tool at the monster's face. The beast and Yu are on the verge of a deadly encounter where only one of them will come out alive. However, from the tool Garyin is holding, a powerful light begins to emanate, and the young man quickly closes his eyes. Right in front of the monster's eyes, a blinding light that illuminates a large part of the forest is emitted from the device, leaving the titan temporarily blind. Serum, heeding the unknown boy's advice, quickly closes her eyes and raises her arm to shield herself from the device's light. The monster, unaware of what was happening, is completely affected by the light that shot directly into his eyes. The beast begins to roar in anger, and after that, our protagonist lands on the ground thinking that he used all the power of that tool, even though it was his last one. When he was holding his call to stun light, a tool made from the scales of the oscillating fish that lives in dungeons deep in the ocean. It has an incredible ability called Incapacitate, which offers a lot for its price and has been beloved by countless adventurers. However, because of its incredible performance, many people misused it and several adventurers began to lose their vision. As a result, its production in the present day of that world is strictly banned and prohibited. Even with her eyes closed due to the tool's incredible reach, Serum, not being accustomed to it, begins to open her eyes slowly. Passing by her with his Garyin says that he did all of this for her, and now she has to find a way to survive on her own because she only has a few seconds left. Our protagonist thinks that no matter what happens in the dungeon, as long as he doesn't do anything for the adventurer, he probably won't be reported. The boy remembers the moment when his boss said that, frankly, smugglers are like cockroaches to adventurers. Despite that, the bounties for them are very high. So, if he acted without thinking, he would be outsmarted and handed over to the government. Therefore, he wasn't going to do anything else. However, as he ran, the boy maintained a firm expression but noticed something behind him that stressed him out. The young man realizes that the girl from before was trying to follow him and not knowing her intentions. Jirion complains. Even though she's out of breath, Jean doesn't give up on her goal and continues running after her savior to thank him. However, of all the lessons he had learned about not being outsmarted, he makes a decision and quickly uses his incredible speed. Sterum, who was right behind him, realizes that somehow the boy managed to escape her sight in a fraction of a second. Jean asserts that she was sure the boy was just there, but suddenly he disappeared. With her guard down, she is surprised by a baton that strikes her directly in the neck, pushing her back. Our protagonist pins the girl to the ground and tells her she's too stupid, asking what she was doing. Sterum, innocently and without malice, explains that she just wanted to thank him for saving her. Coldly, Jeriong retorts, asking if she's joking because he's not stupid enough to fall for that nonsense. Showing that she's not so, Sterum reveals that she didn't follow him just for that, but because she knew the boy was a smuggler. She didn't want to capture him. Instead, she wanted to offer the young man a job. And hearing this, he remained silent for a moment. Seeing the emblem of the Warrior Academy on the shirt the girl is wearing, Yu Seong sighs and lets it go. Moving his baton from the girl's neck, the boy says that he intended to let it slide, but this is her last chance to survive. Turning away and beginning to walk, Jeriong says that he has no interest in learning from a student of the Warrior Academy. In a tone more imposing than ever before, Jeriong threatens Jean, warning that he would truly bury her if she interfered with him again. The girl, understanding the seriousness of the threat, remains silent for a moment. Even so, she doesn't give up, saying that the bounty for a smuggler was 50 million thousand and the bounty for hunters must be 400 million thousand. Jeriong takes this as an affront and becomes completely enraged with veins bulging from his body. However, something changes his mind completely when he looks at the girl's hand and sees something impressive. Sturm is holding a necklace called Blood of Ankle, and Jean says that he could only buy it if he captured 5 smugglers, which would amount to over 200 million thousand and one. With that button in her hands, sweating, she tells him that this was just the initial payment in GT, and that if Jeriong helped her with the exam, she would give him even more money. Staying the girl's wealth, he comments that it's insane thinking that she was just a spoiled brat. But beyond that, she was filthy rich and crazy. Determined in her objectives, the girl retorts that it didn't matter if she was crazy or not. Raising the necklace again, the young woman states that what mattered was that this opportunity would change the life of our protagonist. Once more, He sighs, unexpectedly saying that he imagined something like this would happen. The young man apologizes, stating that it's Jin's fault and that he really has no reason to kill her. Hearing this, the girl is startled, questioning what a huge shadow begins to block the sun, plunging them into darkness, and looking up, the boy says that he already warned her. Jerryong mentions that he told her she only had a few seconds. And in the sky, the primate beast is seen leaping to capture the two youths after recovering from the flash. The monster, furious, immediately crashes to the ground with its forearms, but the two young people manage to escape. Suddenly, the girl sees something coming her way, and when she opens her hand to catch it, she realizes it's the same button that a protagonist was using earlier. He tells her that he didn't give it to her just to stare at it, and asks if she remembers the attack she used earlier. Jean recalls the moment she used fire on the arrow. Jerryong then asks the girl to do it again. Conjure those flames on the baton and throw it back to him. However, the girl panics, stating that she has no magical power left. Before Jean can say anything more, our protagonist insists that she has to figure it out. The monster prepares to attack again, and Jerryong warns that he won't be able to keep the Titan's attention for much longer with just his fists. So, Jean means to hurry. Siren begins to channel her magic into the baton and thinks that she has less than a quarter of her magical power left, since she spent it all on her last strike. The battle between the Titan and the protagonist ensues, and the young woman considers that she can't deal any damage to that monster with so little power. So, instead, she should flee while the boy is distracting the creature, and Yu continues to fight intensely, trying to stay alive. Despite being a bit annoying, our protagonist keeps running, drawing the monster's attention. And before he realizes it, with extreme speed and precision, his flaming baton comes flying towards him, and the young man catches it. After using all that was left in her launching the baton, Jean thinks that she really is crazy to risk so much for just one person. With that, Jerryong leaps into the air and starts spinning with his baton, then states that he's disappointed. The boy says that it's much less than a quarter of what she used before and that it's really disappointing. However, he believes it should still be enough. And with confidence, the young man wields his baton and charges to attack the monster. The battle reaches its peak, and at this moment, Siren thinks that the students of the Warrior Academy have heard this more times than they can count. Analyzing the incredible battle, the girl states that in a fight with a monster, the most important thing for an adventurer isn't just brute strength. The most important thing is a sense of timing, and at this moment, our protagonist is executing it perfectly, dodging attacks, and waiting for the right moment. The key is to seize the perfect timing to aim precise strikes, and at this moment, the primate titan misses its attack, leaving itself exposed. In other words, what adventurers must value above all else is the effectiveness of their attack. And at that moment, Jean was deeply impressed by Yu's skill. Yu, after dodging all the attacks from the primate titan and utilizing perfect timing, seizes the opportunity to strike the monster's chin with his baton. An explosion occurs, and after it disperses, Beast's chin is completely disfigured, its face utterly destroyed. The glasses Jurian was wearing shatter, but upon realizing that his attack was indeed effective and that he had won, the boy allows himself a small smile. A flashback shows a beautiful school illuminated by the rays of the setting sun on the horizon. The young Jean had just finished playing with her friends, and as it was time to go home, the girl bids them farewell. Star remembers as a bodyguard waiting for her with a car ready to take her home. So, the girl says his goodbye to her friends, and the girls plan to meet the next day to play again. However, Jean overhears some gossip with her own friends, saying that she was very lucky to be able to have whatever she wanted. Jean thinks they were entirely wrong, and she really could have almost everything she saw due to her social status. Her father owned a South Korean company ranked 4th, the Jean Song Group, which was globally known and highly renowned. The successor of the group married an elf from another world, and from this relationship, something that would leave a mark on that world was born. The result was Jin's Serum, a half-elf girl with dark hair and a determined spirit. She respected adventurers more than anyone else, and even admired them, seeing them as inspiration. Jean dreamed of becoming an adventurer more than anyone else, and she was willing to give up everything to follow her dream. In the future, shortly after that flashback, a blonde elf is seen saying that something is impossible. Jean is utterly exhausted, lying on the ground, and at this moment, the blonde elf says that the girl's elven blood is very weak, and that she might as well be mostly human. The blonde elf tells someone next to him that despite this, continuing to push the girl is very wrong, and it would be better to convince her otherwise. Then Saren's father, Jean Sunwoo, says that he isn't forcing the girl to do anything, just supporting her because she dreams of becoming an adventurer. He adds that it's not like elven talents are a requirement to become an adventurer, and the elf in front of him agrees. It then states that compared to a human, the girl does indeed have considerably good talent. But despite that, she's still just slightly above average, and even with her effort, it won't be rewarded. The blonde elf says he'll clarify something for Sunwoo, since his daughter isn't just a human from a normal family. She won't give up on her own, and she's as stubborn as her mother, who is the blonde elf's sister. However, even so, the elf coldly says that despite her efforts, the girl will never be strong compared to monster-rank humans. But if she keeps trying and gets up every time she falls, she might become somewhat decent. Once again, there's a time skip showing Jean as a teenager. The elf concludes by telling Sunwoo that with her effort, it will be enough for the girl to receive praise and recognition as a normal human. Even so, this daughter was born with many other benefits compared to her lack of talent, such as prosperity, name, and bloodline. These things will make her efforts futile. Regardless of how much she trains, there are things that can't be achieved. People will laugh at her out of envy, and she might become completely isolated as they will see her as just a spoiled girl. And one thing is certain, even if Jean is extremely strong, she won't be able to handle it for long, because social isolation is something that destroys anyone. Since talent doesn't fall from the sky, we return to the moment when Jaryong defeated his enemy. Jean, watching this scene, is completely astonished after so many events unfolding before her eyes. When our protagonist finally lands on the ground, the body of the monster he just defeated also falls, making a tremendous crash in the forest. The beast was completely destroyed and defeated after taking that powerful attack directly to its face. With a Batman in his hand, our protagonist walks normally until something tickles his ear, catching his attention. As he looked to the side for some reason, Jaryong saw Jean, who was completely shocked as if she were seeing a ghost, staring at the boy's face. The girl muttered that it was impossible, thinking that her savior was just a high school teenager. After touching his face, the young man finally realized what had happened, becoming extremely irritated for being so careless. In a flashback, Jo-won can be seen advising Jaryong to be careful not to break his glasses since they were quite expensive. Holding the strange glasses in his hand, you comment that they should only cost around $5,001 as they look like an ordinary item. However, his boss denied this, explaining that those glasses prevented facial recognition, altered the wearer's voice, and had more than 4 magical back in the present. The expensive glasses were completely shattered on the ground after Jaryong delivered that powerful attack. Placing his hand over his face, the boy muttered that things weren't going as he wanted and that it was frustrating. Still confused, the young woman asked if the boy was a veteran of the Warrior Academy. But irritated by everything that had happened that day, as he just wanted a normal mission, Jaryong answered harshly, "No." Then with extreme anger and veins bulging on his face, he demanded that the young woman hand over what she had promised. Unexpectedly, without hesitation, she quickly handed over the necklace, leaving him surprised by how easily it was done. He became annoyed by how rich Jean was and quickly snatched the jewel from her hand before she could even get a good look at it. With the necklace in his hand, Jaryong began to examine it closely and, after a brief look, affirmed that it wasn't catching his attention once more. Jean asked if the boy needed more money. She mentioned that she understood that even if he didn't attend the Warrior Academy, the tuition for the education center was quite high. Before she could offer to pay his tuition, the young man clarified that he wasn't attending any adventure school. The girl was even more astonished, and he replied that she was completely mistaken in her assumptions. Jaryong explained that he didn't go to any adventure school and had never even been close to one. On the contrary, he studied at regular school. The girl then asked who taught him to fight, and he responded that no one did. Approaching her with both hands in his pockets and a serious expression, he stated that he learned on his own. This time it was Jean who became irritated, and she yelled, saying that was utter nonsense. The girl began to argue that his movements and sense of timing weren't those of someone who had never been trained, and Jaryong must be joking. However, in a rude and not at all gentlemanly manner, something flew toward the girl, hitting her in the face. Realizing that Jaryong had thrown something at her, she caught it in her hand and asked what it was. But after examining it, Murim realized it was a school ID card, and upon removing the identity from the plastic, she began to analyze the information of her savior. Seeing the card, she noticed it belonged to Dongying's secondary school, and saw that the name of our protagonist was Yu Jaryong. Jaryong said she didn't need to make an effort to remember, since that school was just another ordinary one among many in the country. After so many unbelievable events, the girl was on the verge of a breakdown, declaring that it was impossible. Not wanting to be outdone, Yu pointed his baton at the girl and ordered her to hand over something to prove her identity, whether it was a student ID or something similar. After receiving it, the young man began to read it and noticed that the girl's name was Jean Murim, then checked if the document was genuine. Our protagonist also confirmed that the girl was the same age as him. Realizing that she indeed belonged to the warrior for some reason, he put that ID in his pocket, and Jean asked why he was doing that. Jae Ha-young, puzzled, explained that at that moment the girl had made an offer, and that's why he couldn't take any risks. Since his identity had been revealed, if he were to take on a mission for Jean, he needed some assurance that he wouldn't be betrayed by her. Moreover, Jae Ha-young mentioned that he wouldn't do a job without taking the necessary precautions, adding that he still intended to do one last thing. The young man pulled out his phone and suddenly put his arm around Jin's shoulders, pulling her into a side hug, leaving the girl very flustered. Yu explains that he's going to take a selfie with Jean, because if she ever betrayed him, the photo would serve as proof that Jean was also an accomplice to a smuggler. As the two take the photo, the girl remains in shock, and at that moment, Jae Ha-young realizes she might have made a serious mistake. With a menacing expression, our protagonist tells her to smile for the picture. And it was in that instant that she understood she had gotten involved with someone far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Forcing a small nervous laugh, the girl gives a fake smile for the camera. But it was too late to back out. Everything had already started, and so Jae Ha-young snaps a picture with Jean beside the corpse of the Titan. After taking the selfie, the boy continues to look at the phone screen, ensuring that everything in the image was just right. He then tells Jean that they should start discussing prices and asks what exactly she wants. Still processing the young man's intense personality, Murim states that his mission is to collect coins. Jean explains that within the 6-hour time limit, she must collect coins placed in various locations throughout the test area. Her goal was to find a box that contained a coin at a specific location to prove she was a student of the Warrior Academy. The girl also mentions that she already retrieved one coin, so she only needed to collect one more to pass the school's test. Finally, Jean concludes by informing him that the box containing the last necessary coin was quite close by, and our protagonist asks where it was located. The girl reveals that the box is in the ruins of the old Eugen shopping mall, and hearing this, the boy is surprised. As if he had figured something out, Jae-ryong remarks that he understood, but Jean finds his reaction odd. Seeing this, Jae-ryong decides to explain that he realized their meaning wasn't a coincidence, since what he was searching for was also in the mall. After he gives a brief explanation of the mission he's on, the girl is incredulous, shouting that she couldn't believe the boy was after the Imperial Wasp. Having misspoken, the boy corrects himself, saying that he wasn't after the wasp itself, but something like its honey or jelly, though he wasn't sure exactly what it was. Jae-ryong mentions that apparently this jelly has a very strong scent that attracts monsters, and the primate titan was probably drawn to it as well. Our protagonist states that it doesn't really matter, but he asks if the girl really needs to go to the mall, also inquiring if there wasn't another place with coins. Apprehensive and with her head down, the girl informs him that the mall is the only place with a coin left now, because the other groups have likely taken all the other boxes. Hearing this, the boy just stares at the girl, and upon hearing about the groups, he quietly realizes why she was alone. Determined to help Jean, Jae-ryong says it's okay and that it's actually more convenient for him this way. He tells Jean that they'll enter the place, get the coin and the jelly, and then leave in complete safety. He was about to mention the fee, but the girl already set on her goal, says she'll pay. She then adds that it's all the money she has, but upon hearing that enormous amount, our protagonist is very impressed by the girl's wealth. Murim goes on to say that if it's not enough, she would just need a little more time. But before she can continue, you interrupt, saying it's sufficient. Turning to start walking toward their objective, the boy says he'll charge more if there's an emergency. But if the plan goes well, that amount will suffice. The boy asks if the girl has enough stamina to run now, and she promptly nods, saying yes. They immediately start a quick run into the forest to reach their goal. The young woman, who's a bit behind and completely out of breath, analyzes you running effortlessly ahead of her and thinks that the boy is incredibly fast. As our protagonist runs, he sighs, thinking he accepted the offer too quickly and should have asked for more money since the girl seemed wealthy. During the run, Jean shouts, asking if she can ask the boy a specific question. With a bored expression, he allows her to ask, and then she inquires if he really learned everything on his own. Surprising the girl, he responds that not everything, but the vast majority was learned through training alone. As they continued on their path, Jiren began to explain his past, mentioning that when he was a child. However, before he could finish his sentence, the boy sensed danger. Right in front of them, two strange alien-like creatures were hunting their prey. The name of these beasts is Juraptor, a species native to what was once Baramadan. Upon seeing this, Yu quickly tells Jean to prepare for a fight. She, who is running alongside him, quickly halts, draws her bow, and gets ready to attack the beasts. To her surprise, with incredible speed, Jiren doesn't even wait for Jean and charges directly at the creatures. It's explained that Jiren never received any official training as an adventurer, and the skills he possesses now were acquired by risking his life. But there's one exception. When he was younger, he witnessed his father's incredible movements. This allowed him to learn 3 specific techniques. As he approaches the monster with his baton, Geraint uses one of those techniques against the Gyrahaptor. The first of these techniques is called the needle, where he uses all his speed and weight to strike a vital point of his opponent. At this moment, the boy executes the same move. This is a simple yet refined technique that he gained through experience, senses, and above all, his talent. It's a technique that even top-ranked adventurers have not mastered, but Geraint has perfected it, defeating the first of the monsters with just that one strike. Since the other monster was only a 2-star, it was easily defeated by Jean, who only sustained a few scratches. After putting her bow away, Murim comments that something fell off since Gyrahaptors usually travel in groups of at least 5 creatures. Hearing this, Geraint informs her that it means she wasn't the only one affected by the scent of the royal jelly. It's likely that all sorts of monsters are nearby, and at this point they've already reached the outskirts of the city where the shopping mall is located. Noticing that the girl didn't seem to be in the best condition, you suggest they take a quick break before continuing. Returning to the previous conversation, the girl asks if he had any personal training when he was once again. You respond that he didn't, that he only watched someone train and managed to mimic that person's movements. However, because he was trying to be stealthy and not be noticed by this person, he only learned a few specific moves. Since he doesn't get asked this question often, he wonders why the girl is so curious about it. Instead of answering, Jean becomes extremely frustrated, stating that after all this, she really doesn't like him. Suddenly, the young woman throws something at Geraint, who quickly catches it, not understanding what it is. Upon examining it, he realizes it's a stamina vial, which is extremely expensive. Seeing this, he asks if she's really going to give it to him for free. Jean urges the boy drink the liquid because he probably wasn't in his original condition due to exhaustion. The boy points out that Jean just said she didn't like him, but then gave him a gift, so she wasn't keeping her word. But to the girl's surprise, the boy begins to pocket the vial, and Murim asks why he's doing that. Garyon responds that he won't drink it because he could sell it later, leaving Murim even more furious. She starts arguing with Garyon, saying that it's worth a lot, and that he should just take it. Still, the boy explains that he knows the value of the item, and that if he sold it on the black market, he would get a good amount of money. The girl mentally curses the boy, thinking he's strange and extremely weird, but he's all she has. Changing his mind, Garyon says that since she doesn't need to rest after drinking the vial, they should continue their adventure, and so they do. Noticing that the girl is still a bit distracted, reflecting on everything, the boy thinks that rich kids are extremely strange and don't care much about money. Afterward, the two approach them all, and Garyon comments that Jean already knew this, but they should go over the plan one more time to be sure. He states that their goal isn't to hunt any monsters, but to grab what they need and leave immediately. He adds that no matter how many monsters are inside, she should always follow his instructions and keep her composure despite everything. Finally, Garyon says he's sure the girl has learned a lot, but his specialty is survival, and she just needs to trust him. However, for some reason, Jean is acting strangely, unable to identify the cause of the weird sensation she's feeling. Last semester, Jean was a stranger at the Warrior Academy, unrecognized by others and often excluded. However, this was the first time she ventured into danger with a companion who didn't belittle her. And as Garyon stands up, he declares that they should get moving. The girl remains a bit apprehensive, knowing she's about to face imminent danger. The two of them are now standing in front of an old shopping mall, which is completely overrun by vegetation. Inside, everything is dark and ruined, with the forest and trees having completely taken over the place. But something happens that frightens not only Jean, but also Gary, and putting both of them on high alert. An overwhelming pressure begins to envelop the two of them, and Jean asks what it is. But even Gary doesn't know, as he has never encountered anything like in his life. Looking ahead, they both noticed several mutilated monster corpses, and whoever did that was incredibly powerful. Humans are beings capable of being braver than they imagine, and if they are properly motivated, they can withstand any situation. The only obstacle to this are events that fall outside the scope of the initial plan. Those monsters are not from this area. They are dangerous even for professionals seeing the carnage. They can't even imagine what could be there. The boy tells her not to lose focus. There's something very dangerous there, and it's not as if she didn't know that. She was just surprised, because the scene is scarier than she imagined. But so far, nothing has changed. As soon as he finished speaking, she saw something in the shadows. There was a silhouette moving. Upon seeing this, the boy drew his spear. The creature stood up. It was a slasher lip with a danger level between 2 and 3 stars. Without wasting time, he charged towards the creature. Its mouth started to open, revealing something. It was a huge tongue, now heading towards the boy. Quickly, he managed to defend himself from the attack using his staff. However, he felt that something was different. The creature had managed to grab his weapon with its tongue. Taking advantage of the contact between them, it retracted its limb. With the force exerted, he ended up being pulled along with the staff. Before getting closer to the creature, he'd let go of it. If he hadn't done that, he would have been in its jaws. From above, safely, he looked at the monster again. Leaving his position, he prepared to land a kick. The attack was accurate. He succeeded. From a distance, the girl watched attentively, waiting for the right time to strike. Calmly, he picked up the staff from the ground. That was terrifying for her. She hadn't expected that creature to still be alive when they arrived, but its survival ability is high. But the boy said that it wasn't just that. He had kept it alive longer on purpose, in case anyone arrives there, and that will serve as a warning, as that creature tends to scream to call its allies whenever it feels its life is in danger. The girl didn't understand and wanted to know who he wanted to warn with the alarm. It was for himself, because he couldn't just sit around waiting. Another figure appeared, saying he had a lot to clean up, and that after that he ended up feeling a bit exhausted. The girl was very apprehensive, and she wanted to know if they knew each other. The one who had arrived said that this wasn't very normal. These two were too new to be smugglers. Looking more closely at them, he saw a crest on the girl's clothing. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared. Now, he was on the ground in front of them, asking if they were from the warrior school. Answering the question, the girl said they were. If that's the case, he didn't even know what kind of team they were. But it's a pity, because they were going to end up dying in that place. Hearing this, the girl was terrified. The boy asked why she was paying attention to those words. That person wasn't a normal explorer, as she should have guessed. He was a villain who had come to kill him and steal the royal jelly. Then he said he must not have contact with his commissioner and shouldn't touch his things without authorization. But he said he only had to deal with consequences of his actions if caught, and that so far he had been very lucky. He had heard that his companion was smuggling a highly valuable item. The plan was to ambush him along the way, but things ended up happening differently. He failed the task of having to exterminate them. He confirmed that he had entered there, but still hadn't managed to find him. But he imagines that he must be hiding somewhere smugglers use. Hearing this, the boy realized that this was why contact had been cut off at and not because of the wasp's venom. It was all the work of the guy who had just appeared, even without having started fighting. Jerry Ong could already sense the situation. That opponent would be tough, and even suggested that he could provide a painless death if they cooperated. This man was certainly ranked higher than the weirdo they encountered earlier. Jerry Ong told the girl to find the coins and run, because he would buy them some time. With the deeds of that guy, there shouldn't be too many monsters left, and she should run fast. While he was still talking to her, the weirdo had started his attack. Even though it had been abnormally fast, his sword missed the target. Now, the boy reinforced the command for her flee and stop being stupid. For them to make money, it was necessary for her to be okay. Seeing her leave, the weirdo got upset. He said that wasn't a wise decision. Working together until now has increased their chances of survival. But the boy wasn't thinking with focus and determination. His staff was wielded with mastery and violence. This scared the weirdo, who realized his movements had been telegraphed. Now, something was headed towards his face. It was the sole of Jerry Ong's foot, which had stomped his face furiously. The weirdo's body flew from the impact, but the boy knew that things weren't over yet. He heard the weirdo say he was surprised by what had happened. Indeed, he had underestimated them for being young, but now he would use his equipment. Even though he was young, he was better than the average professional, so the weirdo would be quick. This was Yang Dogan, a gold-class adventurer. The ground was cracked with multiple fissures. The kettle had been heated, and someone said that wasn't bad at all. In fact, his instant noodles were very good. Looking at the bald man, he offered him some, but he declined. He should at least sit down, and it would take a while for the guy to wake up from his beauty sleep. The bald man was furious, as he paid a lot of money to the guy who was sleeping in the middle of the job. He walked around arrogantly, saying he had been an adventurer. The other man told him not to be so hard on him. He didn't lose because he was bad. He lost because he needed to. What people ignore is that adventurers don't just fight humans. That guy must have been trained in hunting and exploring, not in meeting to fight another person. Not being used to it, it's expected that he would lose to his smuggler. The bald man was outraged and said that even among adventurers, he had heard different things. And indeed among them, there are those who fight with each other. The better they get, the greater the rewards, and fights become inevitable. When companions end up giving into greed and betraying their colleagues, hearing that the bald man didn't want to believe that they kill each other, but there's no one to stop them. Not to mention that there are no rules inside the dungeons. You just say a monster killed him. It doesn't even require an alibi. In fact, the higher their rank, the more they need to be prepared to fight others. But things aren't that simple. The sleeper's class wasn't high enough, which is why he's on the ground now. Attacking a companion, that's cute. If he got caught, it means a peaceful fight happened outside the dungeon. It was certainly a discussion without equipment, but the bald man didn't know what equipment was. It's the weapons and armor that the adventurer takes to the dungeon insignificant. With them, even the sleeper could have put up more fight. They're strong enough to make a difference. Equipment is half of an adventurer's combat ability. He knew the weirdo hadn't dodged his attack. That blow is accurate and forceful, hitting him squarely. The blade has high defense. While thinking, the weirdo told him not to get distracted. Faced with the imminent blow, he blocked the strike with his staff. Being distracted is not very respectful on his part, neither to his opponent nor to his own life, which could end in the blink of an eye. Taking advantage of the moment, he kicked the boy in the stomach. The blow was very strong. He was thrown several meters. Before crashing into something, he stopped his advance by planting his feet on the ground. As soon as he stopped, the weirdo was already on top of him once again and delivered several slashes with his blade. Unable to block all of them, some small cuts found their way to his body. A small wound appeared on his cheek. The weirdo was now very confident and taunted him, telling him to fight like before if he was capable. That was impossible. The shadow jacket was an S-rank armor, and the weirdo was wearing one. It uses the user's blood to increase defense against physical damage as well as boost strength. That weirdo at this very moment was using berserker combat. It would be hard to find openings, but not impossible. However, if he attempted a poorly planned counterattack, he would die without a doubt. The battle continued, and the weirdo was out of control. A quick slash was made at abdomen height. This caused the boy to panic, and the weirdo said he had fallen for his feet. Even so, he had lasted a long time. However, that wasn't what he expected to see. The boy,